Good morning. My name is Chris Demers. I'm the I'm the Extension Program Manager at the University of Florida School of Forest Resources and Conservation. The Extension Program that I manage, there's a couple of them. Primarily, it's the Forest Stewardship Program, which serves private landowners across Florida. And I'm also involved with the Florida Invasive Species Partnership, their outreach program, which works with the SISMAs that are spread around the state and other statewide efforts that are trying to address invasive species issues. So my topic today is conservation on private lands, and I think it's going to tie in pretty well with what Wynn was talking about in his presentation, because I kind of envision our clientele as, you know, those people that have the planet in their hands, or they're kind of the molders of the landscape. So they're important people to work with. So I don't know what you think about when you're driving down a road and seeing the landscape around you. My kids will ask, are we almost there in this kind of a situation? My brain is always thinking, you know, whose land is this? Do they have a management plan for it? Some of you are probably looking at this and saying, it needs fire, right? When we're driving by something like this, we know who manages that. We know who owns it. We, the people, own this land, and it's managed by the U.S. Forest Service. What about this landscape? Who owns that? We don't know. If you're driving by there, by looking at the ground, you can tell there's a little bit of fire going on. Maybe they're doing some thinning. Who knows who owns it, though, and what their plan is. So that's kind of how my brain works when I'm driving down the road or looking at different landscapes. Well, most of Florida is in that situation. You know, we don't really, I guess, have much control over the management of it. Much of it is in private hands. And this map shows kind of the distribution of public lands. The green is state-owned land, and the brown is federal lands. So the Air Force bases, the military bases, national forests, and state parks. And then the rest of that is private agricultural properties. Municipal government owns some of that in the yellow. You know, the point is over 70% of the forests, I'm zooming in on forest here, are in private ownership. 65% of that are owned by non-industrial, what we call non-industrial, which are owned by families, individuals, partnerships, and then the remaining portion is owned by the larger TMOs, REITs, investment management organizations, a little bit of timber company lands. So, you know, who cares? So what, you might be saying. Well, for some, I know maybe not in this room, but money is a big deal to a lot of policymakers and people that are working in the policy and management arena. About every 3 or 4 years, our department, Alan Hodges in the University of Florida, IFAS, Food and Resource Economics, does a study about the agricultural impact or economic impact of agriculture in the state. And, these huge numbers come out of these studies. 148 billion impact, 14% of all the jobs in the state are tied to agriculture or associated industries across the state. Agriculture, private lands, and of course forest lands are a part of this in terms of timber production and some of the other commodities that come out of that. And there's the citation for that study if you're interested. Zooming into more ecosystem values and ecosystem services, our department did a study in 2012 on the ecosystem services provided by lands that are enrolled in the Forest Stewardship Program, which is the program I'm working in. Quantified the physical as well as economic value of water, carbon storage, wildlife habitat, and they also included timber in their which one could argue may or may not be an ecosystem service, but it is a value that comes out of the of that forest. What they found was a typical acre of stewardship land. Much of this land, by the way, is North Florida, probably north of Ocala and west. There's some lands down here that were a part of that calculation, but most of those lands are in North Florida. Conservative value of all those values put together is around $7,000 per acre, which is pretty surprising. It's in many regions this is comparable to the fair market value of that property. And there's the citation for that study if you're interested. That's a really interesting study to look for. It was interesting to see how they put some values on some of those values, or put economic values on some of those variables. So if it's economic, if it's physical, if it's some of us are interested in habitat values. All these things come out of private lands. The timber, and then in that middle picture is a property up in Jefferson County. It's one of those big quail plantations where they do a lot of prescribed fire. And how can you put an economic value on that intact ground cover that's got so much diversity and all those plants and all the insects and the birds and all the components of that ecosystem that use that? It's just remarkable. So I'm going to talk about our program and how some of this ties into the landscape. I work at the University of Florida. We have extension programs in these 4 major areas. If you were to use a font size to represent the amount of resources that goes into these specific programs, natural resources would be a very small font. Agriculture would be huge. Family, youth, and community and horticulture would probably be, kind of in the middle. So we in the natural resources extension programs, we cover a huge discipline, but the number of us and our resources that we have to work with are relatively small compared to some of these other programs. But my program is within that natural resources category, and of course it leaks into agriculture because of the timber, horticulture, of course, because we deal with landscaping issues, invasive exotic issues, and so environmental horticulture is closely related. And then family, youth, and community, the 4-H program, we certainly try to get involved with some of the 4-H programs, the youth programs. So our program covers a lot of the bases of extension. We do events, we do workshops and tours around the state. We do print material. We have websites, social media. It's a partnership program. I'm supported by the Florida Forest Service. They cover my salary pretty much. The Sustainable Forestry Initiative, which is a forest certification program, covers a big chunk of my operating budget. So we rely on a lot of external partners to make our program happen in terms of financial resources, information resources, and participation by other agencies, and also private consultants and private industry gets involved as well. But our mission is really to help Florida's landowners, private landowners, forest landowners to manage their lands for environmental, economic, and social benefits. And this is a broad objective, and it really depends on where they are, but we're trying to help them reach their objectives in a sustainable way. Try to keep the ecosystem function tied in to what they want out of their land, and it's a challenge. So our program is within this broader, what we call the Florida Land Steward Partnership, which is basically encompasses the landowner outreach and financial assistance programs of our partners, the Florida Forest Service, the Fish and Wildlife Commission, the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service. We also partner with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Partners Program, which provides financial and technical assistance to landowners for managing wildlife habitat, particularly critical wildlife habitat, gopher tortoises, red cockaded woodpeckers, and species of special concern. So all of these partners are really trying to reach private landowners, and so we've figured we can do it a lot better together than separately. So, and I think there's a lot of potential to do some outreach down here and maybe do some targeted outreach to landowners within the Charlotte Harbor estuarine program. I think there's some potential there. The Invasive Species Partnership, which is another important partnership program I'm involved with. I've actually had to get someone funded to really take on this program, because in addition to the stewardship program, it's really blown up to be an outreach or extension program of its own. Some of you may know Rose Godfrey with our department. She is the Invasive Species Partnership Outreach Coordinator, and she does the monthly webinars with the various cooperative invasive species management areas, the SSMAs. There's a Southwest Florida SSMA that some of you may be familiar with. Kind of show of hands for Southwest SSMA? Familiar? All right, great, fantastic. And she does a monthly webinar with the different SSMAs, and she'll get experts and partners from those organizations to give presentations and share the latest and greatest about what the SSMAs are doing on the ground, some of their innovative control techniques. It's become an important program, and we've gotten support from the administration and IFAS to focus some resources on this program as well, which is important. Outreach is a big part of what we do. So I want to take a few minutes, the remainder of my time, to kind of shine a spotlight on the landowners that are out there doing this management. These are the stewards that are putting a lot of what we are talking about, to work on the ground. And many of them have the objective to manage their landscape on a long timeline. There's one landowner in Northwest Florida, and actually many of these will say that they're managing on a 300-plus year timeline. They're managing an ecosystem, a habitat. It's not just within their lifetime that they're looking at. They're looking long-term. And I'd say that all of the landowners that I'm talking about this morning have that in common. So these folks keep me going. These are great people. This is Mike Adams. He has about 9 acres in St. Johns County. He's right on the St. Johns River, and he's actually a wildlife biologist himself. He put together this field guide about all the ecosystems, the habitat, the history. He named it the Saturiwa Conservation Area, and Saturiwa was a Timucuan Indian chief that resided in that area. He's certified in our stewardship program. He's also in the tree farm program, another program that's closely associated with our program. And there's a lot of landowners that are certified or involved in both of those programs. John Gould, he's up in Washington County. He has property on the Choctawhatchee River, and he's really involved in forested uplands. He's got some ravines. Kind of more of your traditional timber-oriented landowner, but interested in the full suite of species. He's doing a lot with fire, with longleaf. He maintains and protects his river borders, his riparian borders, the wetlands, adheres and exceeds the best management practices, does a really good job, and he's involved with our program. He's actually one of the editors of our co-editor and contributor to our newsletter that we put out quarterly. The FARs are up in St. Johns County. They're interesting in that they're surrounded by a growing urban area, and it's a little place called St. John's, which was once very rural, but there's been a lot of development around them. But they do prescribed burning, and they let all their neighbors know when they're burning. They involve youth. They get the 4-H involved with planting trees and doing some of their management. They're very good with public relations, neighbor relations, keeping people informed about what they're doing so that they understand how their property fits into the larger landscape in that area. Really interesting people. These folks have 15 acres in the Florida Rocklands down in Miami-Dade County. They're managing South Florida rockland ecosystem. They establish South Florida pines. They drill it into that lime rock. That substrate you see there in that bottom slide, that's solid lime rock, and they plant trees into those. They do prescribed fire, and they've been recognized in our program. They're the 96 forest stewardship landowners, and in 2012, we recognize them as the Florida Land Stewards of that year. Fred Hunter in Lake County has some pristine scrub habitat, and his overall objective is to manage and glorify the scrub jay, and he is passionate about that. Fred's now in his 80s, and his big challenge now is finding an organization to carry on the management of this property. And he's working on a conservation easement, trying to get the University of Florida and other organizations to get involved in what he's doing. And that's an ongoing challenge for him, and hope he finds a solution soon. Soul Sanctuary, this is a property in Walton County. They are on the steep head ravines on the Shoal River, which flows into the Choctawhatchee River, I believe. Really interesting property, interesting people. Robert Larson is a world-renowned sculptor, and he puts sculptures up around his property that have to do with ecology, peace, human relationships. Some of it's quirky. He has one that kind of attracts UFOs or something like that. They're very interesting people. But they're also doing upland and riparian land management and preservation. This was our latest landowner that was recognized as the Land Steward of the Year last year. Helen Roth. She's in Gadsden County and has a really interesting place where there's a ravines in the lowlands, and then there's 4 corners where she's restoring upland pine, longleaf pine, all the ground cover, and she does a lot of the work herself. She has a little electronic chainsaw that she removes a lot of the hardwoods that have encroached, and then she will apply fire back to that and try to get the ground cover restored. But she does great work, and she's really involved with her local native plant society, and she gets them involved with the management and some of the projects on the property. And she's just great. She's passionate. She knows a lot of the ground plants, a lot of the vegetation that you see on the property. She has it all documented, cataloged. Really, really knowledgeable and inspirational landowner. All right, that concludes my talk, and I don't know if I have just went beep. All right, thank you.